Porch. So glad you joined us again tonight. Tonight I'm multitasking, doing two things at once, which is hard for me at this age. But if you see things going on in the background, it's because of the other project that's going on. Right now we're going to make kraut. Probably one of the most frequent questions on Debbie's Back Porch and any of the groups that have to do with food is how do I make kraut? Tell me about kraut. I made kraut and it molded. What did I do wrong? And so I thought I would spend just a little bit of time sort of demystifying kraut. I tell people pretty often kraut is science, but it's not rocket science. And you can get an awful lot of conflicting information if you look up how to make kraut. What I'm going to do tonight is a small batch kraut, 2 quarts. I make it that way on purpose because I don't want to can it. Kraut is a wonderful food. It has lots of probiotics in it. It's good for you. It's also one of the few ways to preserve cabbage, since it cannot be canned, and you may freeze it, but it doesn't freeze all that well. And you can dry it, but to preserve large amounts of cabbage, I find that kraut is handy. It's good for preserving, and it tastes great, and it's good for you. So I want to demystify it a little bit. We're not going to weigh salt out in grams. We're going to just sort of talk about the process of what kraut is, and we're going to get started right now. Well, I have weighed out my cabbage here. I have about 4 pounds. It's an estimate because I'm going to cut out the heart, the core of this one, and I'm going to do some talking while I chop. The cabbage is washed, the ends are washed. We're just going to go from there. So, what is fermentation? Fermentation is a controlled spoilage, some people say. Some people say controlled rot. I'm not going to say that. What we're going to do is put together the ingredients that will result in fermentation. Fermentation happens from something called lactobacillus that grows when you give it the right conditions. And those right conditions generally are a vegetable matter, and salt and moisture. So your goal in making kraut is to set up a fermentation process that will encourage the lactobacillus and discourage and inhibit other types of bacteria. So there are many pieces that go into this, but they're all pretty simple. And when you start looking for directions for making kraut, some people make it too simple because there are steps that should be followed, and some people make it way, way too confusing. So your goal is to cut your vegetables so that they will weep and let go of their moisture. Add the proper amount of salt so that that will begin fermentation, and control the access of oxygen, because this needs to be done, this fermentation, not all fermentations, but this one needs to be done in the absence of oxygen. So you can do this in a crock. If you do it in a crock, then you set up something, put something on it to weigh the cabbage down below the water level, because you don't want oxygen to get to the cabbage. And the amount of salt is important, but I'm going to speak sacrilege here. It isn't crucial. You can put in too much salt that you inhibit the lactobacillus. You can put in not enough salt, and that won't inhibit the other bacteria. So there is a range there in which you can get a good fermentation going. And the fermentation also depends on the weather, the temperature. It depends on how much moisture was in your vegetable to start with. There are all kinds of variations that happen in the science of fermentation. Some you can control, some you can't. Now there is a recommended amount of salt, and that is 3 tablespoonsful for 5 pounds of cabbage. If you go 2 grains short or 2 grains over, it's actually never made any difference to me. If I put 10 tablespoonsful in 5 pounds of cabbage, I would probably have a mess, because that would keep the lactobacillus from growing. Now, I'm not going to make you watch all this, but what I'm doing here is I like a kind of a coarse cut cabbage in my sauerkraut, and you might prefer it a little bit thinner. You can use a mandolin. I understand people use mandolins. I never have. Or a grater, a processor on your KitchenAid, whatever you need. You need to cut it up enough that it will begin to weep, that it will let go of its fluid, its liquid. And because we like it, we eat our kraut more like a salad. I don't can it. I don't necessarily want it soft. But my coarse cut means that it might take a little bit longer for it to process. So just know that. That's one of the factors that can vary. And I'm kind of old school. I like a good knife and a good chop. So while I'm doing this, you go get you a pencil and paper, because we're going to do some rough math on figuring salt. Okay, you got your pencil and paper? Need you to check my math. Really. What I have here is about 4 pounds of kraut chopped up. It's actually a little bit less than 4 pounds. I want to put this in 2 quarts. So a rough measurement of that is a pound a pint. Very rough. So about 4 quarts, about 4 pounds would give me 2 quarts. I won't be able to fill the jars all the way full, so this is a little bit less than 4 pounds. Your measurement for salt that's recommended is 3 tablespoonsful for 5 pounds of cabbage. Now that's a minimum, and like I say, it isn't 100% set in stone if you're a grain or 2 off, but you need to stick pretty close to that. And if you go over it, if you go over that measurement, you can slow down the fermenting process. If you do the calculation on that, 3 tablespoonsful for 5 pounds works out to 3/5 of a tablespoonful per pound, or 6/5 of a tablespoonful per quart. I use the measurement of a tablespoonful because you don't really get a whole quart in a quart jar. And if you're a few grains over, I round up a little bit, then that's pretty darn close. It's different if you're using kosher salt. Right now I have canning and pickling salt. With kosher salt you need to measure 25% more than that, because the grains are bigger, so it weighs less. So for every tablespoonful of canning salt, you need a tablespoonful and a quarter for kosher salt. So the process, I'm going to get it started, and then I'll come back to you in a few hours, is put some of your kraut, of your cabbage in a bowl. And this looks like a whole lot more than 2 quarts, but really it weighs at under 4 pounds. And then sprinkle with a tablespoonful of salt. And that's 6/5, right? And work it a little. Now this is grocery store cabbage. It just never has quite as much liquid in it as fresh cabbage. When I'm lucky enough and I actually have cabbage in the garden, it has so much more moisture and flavor. But this will be good. We didn't make it up to the markets in LJ this year, so I didn't get any of that lovely, lovely cabbage. And what I'm doing here is more or less bruising the cabbage. Now, if your cabbage doesn't let go of enough liquid when you bruise it, you can add more. And you can add more liquid by making a brine. And you're going to put about a tablespoon and a half full of salt in a quart of room temperature water. I know there are some recipes out there that tell you to add boiling water, but really you don't want to do that. You want to use room temperature water. If you have hard water, use filtered water or bottled water, but you don't want to use boiling water. If you feel like you need to boil it for safety, let it cool before you put it in your kraut. And yes, this is messy. This is always messy. But I can actually see the cabbage getting shiny, which means it's starting to let go. Okay, so we've put 1 tablespoonful and 1/5, and we need to do 1 more. One tablespoon and 1/5. And remember, we're probably going to add some brine to this because it's not going to give up enough liquid. Which is why I say you have some flexibility on the amount of salt you add. You just don't want to add too much or way too little, because without enough salt, the bad bacteria that you don't want will grow and overpower the lactobacillus, and that's when you get mold. If you put too much salt, the lactobacillus won't grow, because too much salt will inhibit its growth. And there are other ways you can do this. You might have a mallet. I do feel the moisture letting go, but it takes a little while. As I get older, my hands may not be strong enough to keep doing this, but I kind of like doing it with my hands to squeeze it out. And if I feel any pieces in there that are too big, I'll take them out and chop them a little more. But this cabbage is starting to let go its liquid. So the next step is to cover it. I cover mine with a clean towel, put it to the side, and wait 2, 3, 4 hours, whatever your schedule calls for. If you're doing something else, like I'm doing something else, you can wait until the other project's done. And come back, and the kraut should have let go of some moisture, enough to pack it in. If it doesn't, we'll make a brine solution to make sure that we cover, that the cabbage is covered in an appropriate liquid to allow fermentation, which with kraut is an anaerobic process. We don't need any oxygen to reach the cabbage. So, oh, the other thing is I saved out a couple of outside stiff leaves. There was a purpose for that. We're going to use those to help us weight the kraut down when we come back for our next step. So I'll come back to you in a couple hours and we'll see what we've got. Well, we've been gone about 3 hours. We've had dinner, I've canned beans, it's been a busy time, and our cabbage was sitting and waiting. As I told you, grocery store cabbage doesn't make as much juice as, say, fresh cabbage does. But if you can see down inside, there is juice flowing. I'm going to go ahead and jar this up. I'll jar up one so you can see the process. Just washed my hands. Be sure you get all the soap off your hands, because soap could inhibit the fermentation process. What I have here is 2 wide-mouth jars, and hope I've got enough to fill up both. And I have here a quart of water with 1.5 teaspoons full of salt. If we don't have enough brine, we're going to add this salt water. Now I use my tap water because I let it sit for a while and off gas, but I don't ever have any trouble with my tap water. You might, if you have hard water, you may want to buy some distilled water to use. It's up to you, but I do pretty well with this. So I'm going to start stuffing, and I want to pack this down in pretty tight. But I don't want it up too high. Let me go ahead and start with the other one, because I want to be able to get to the juice down in the bottom. By the way, while I'm stuffing this jar, I really want to thank all my subscribers and the folks who've been watching the videos. We are pretty close to 500 subscribers in our first month, and that surprised me, and I really appreciate it a lot. So keep coming and share with your friends, because the more the merrier. And don't forget our Facebook groups, because those are pretty important to building the community. And I will have the links for those Facebook groups in the comments of this video. So I'm going back and forth to get equal amounts. See, I'm pretty close to 4 pounds here because I have 2-quart jars. And I'm not going to have enough brine to fill these jars, but I'm going to have some. And then this brine that I have made will fill up the rest. And I hope you get from that, this has 1.5 tablespoons full of salt in it. This is not an exact science with the salt. A lot depends on how much juice there is in your cabbage, the temperature outside. There are a lot of things. Okay, I'm going to eyeball it. About half the juice in that one, and about half the juice in that one. And then I'm going to finish filling it up to about 1 inch with this salt water. And headspace is not as critical in this as it is in canning, but you do need some headspace. I'll show you why. Poke that down a little bit. Okay, your goal here is to keep your cabbage below the water line, because the fermentation happens in the absence of oxygen, and the fermentation process will off-gas carbon dioxide. So your goal here is to set up a system so that the carbon dioxide can be released without allowing oxygen in. So I have cut a leaf, and I'm going to poke it down in around. A triangle works best for me. You may find another way. And poke it down, doggone. And you want it to be below the water line. And the stiffness of the leaf will help hold your cabbage under the water. Okay, I forgot my lids. I'll be right back. Now it's very important to take a clean spoon and get any little tiny pieces of cabbage that have escaped, lovingly known as floaties, because those can cause mold. They're exposed to oxygen. You want to make sure you get rid of all of those. So look closely now. I have the water line above the cabbage line in both of them. Now I got some more floaties. We take out any little loose pieces of cabbage that are floating. And then we put a lid on it. I actually like to use tattlers without the rubber ring, because they're not a total airtight seal. Because this is going to off-gas carbon dioxide, and if you don't allow for that, you could have an explosion. This is all you do right now. I'm going to set this off in my dining room, which is a little bit cooler and gets less traffic. I'm going to put it on a cutting board because it could seep, and I don't want it to seep on the furniture. For right now, this is all I can show you. And I'm going to go ahead and post this video for you. But I'm going to come back every couple of days and show you the process and add it to the video, so that when we're done, in approximately 3 weeks when it's kraut, I can show you that. Now, I've been doing this off and on for a long time. I was first shown how to do this back in the 1970s. And I can tell you for sure I've never lost a quart of kraut. But I've said that now, and so one of these may mold. So here's the thing I want to tell you about mold. If you see mold, black mold, dark mold, anything other than a very light white scum that may form on the top, dump it. It's lost. What I told you at the beginning was making kraut is about a controlled spoilage. It's not really spoilage, but it's a conversion, and you're trying to control it. Mold is a sign you failed. And someone somewhere is going to tell you, oh, just skim it off, eat it anyway. Please don't. If you see mold on the top, mold spores and tendrils are all through your product. If you see mold, throw it away. Don't eat it. And start over. Cabbage is cheap. This is easy to do. But if you followed these steps, it's unlikely that it will mold. I'm going to come back once a day for the first few days and burp it. This is what I call burping it. You just open it and allow carbon dioxide to escape. I'm going to examine it. I'm going to make sure that my cabbage is below the water line, that there are no floaties. If I need to, I will add some more brine to keep the water line, the liquid line, above the cabbage. Then I'll close it back. And after a few days of that, it'll stop hissing. It'll stop off-gassing. And at that point, you can just wait. We're looking at approximately a period of 3 weeks. A few days more, a few days less. The thing about kraut is you can tell it's done when it tastes right. So at any point, it's safe to eat as long as you don't have any mold. So this is the process so far. I'm going to post this for you, and then I'll come back on a regular basis and show you the progress and add it on to the video. Thank you for joining us on Debbie's Back Porch. I hope you make some kraut. It is so good and good for you, and I think you'll enjoy it. Kraut, day 2. There was a little weeping, so I moved it and cleaned it up. We are looking for floaties and any scum that might form. There's a couple of floaties, little pieces that work their way up. Make sure our cabbage stays below the line. There's a little bubbling in here, but not a whole lot. Add just a little brine. Okay, got the floaties out. Added the brine. This one has a little more stuff going on. You can actually smell the beginning of the fermentation. Just floaties out. Eventually, we'll probably get a little white scummy looking stuff on the top, but we don't have that now. Okay, end of day 2. Okay, kraut day 6. Push it down. You can smell the fermentation. Got a few floaties. Let's get those out. Notice you see no scum, you see no mold, but the fermentation is happening. Don't need any brine. Let's push it down. We have a few floaties. Let's get those off. Okay. It's doing what it's supposed to do. You can smell the fermentation. We're going to leave it alone now for 3 or 4 days. We'll come back and check it. I think it's going to be kraut pretty soon. Well, this is kraut day. We put this in on October 22nd, and this is November the 2nd. So 11 days. Ooh, it's tight. That means it's fizzling. Okay. If you were here, you could smell that even though we're not at the 3-week point, For all intents and purposes, this is kraut. It's just not as fermented as we want it to be. Let me see if I can get you a better view. Because I want you to see it so you know how to recognize what you're looking for. Okay, I think that's the right spot. Okay, there is no sign of anything that looks anything like mold. There are some floaties, and although we're probably past the point at which that would matter, I'm going to take them out. Now, just a recap. We put this in on October 22nd. I believe that's right. I have skimmed it 2 or 3 times and showed you when I did it. I made sure to keep the little floaties. I hope you can see what I mean by floaties, the little tiny pieces of cabbage that come up out of it. I've added just a little more brine. I'm going to add a little bit more right now. This is 1.5 tablespoons full of pickling canning salt. And our only purpose for adding it is because we lose a little bit of water, and we want to make sure that all the cabbage, including any little floaties, is below water, because that's how it ferments, and mold won't form as long as all the contents are suspended below water. So, I mean, you could safely eat this. It's just not very sour yet, and we want it to be sour. So usually that takes about 3 weeks, but you know, you could eat it at 2 weeks. I'm gonna check on it again probably in 4 or 5 days. First couple of days we had a little seepage. That's why I moved it back in here in the kitchen on my counter, because my counter's ceramic tile and nothing will hurt it except a hammer. So we don't really have hardly any floaties in here. Now, one of the reasons I'm showing you this is because at some point during the process, if you choose to make kraut, you may have, and I was kind of hoping I would have it this time, but you don't always have it. I'm trying to line this up, you see. A sort of a white scum that forms on the top. And if you get that white scum, which is really just very thin on the top, you can skim that off. It may be mold, but it's not dangerous mold. But if you get anything that's black, gray, has anything on it that looks like strings, that means your process has failed. Now, I know folks have said in the past, I've seen them say it, oh, just skim it off. Well, if you've got some mold, some black or gray or the bluish tint mold that's forming on top of your kraut, it's wrong. It's done wrong. It's not fermenting, it's spoiling. And since fermentation is a controlled process, mold means you've lost control. So I keep showing you this, and I don't open it when you're not here. I'm only opening this so you can see the process as we go. I'm going to put this away back where it was, here in my kitchen, and come back to it. Probably it'll be a week now. I doubt anything could go wrong at this point unless it were 98 degrees and my kitchen were hot all the time, but it's November. That's one of the reasons kraut's kind of a fall thing. So I'm going to put this back, and I'll come back to you in about a week. And at that point, we may eat some of it just to see how we like it. Well, welcome back. For those of you who've been following the progress of our small batch kraut, this is day 21. And this is when we're going to call it kraut. So I'm going to open this up, and I want to show you, this is what we have. We have no mold. This is very clean looking. I'm going to take the leaf cover that I had on off. Now, you can't smell this. I can smell it. This is kraut. And I'm going to taste a little bit of it as soon as I open the other jar to make sure that it has no mold, that it's clean, smells lovely, and is kraut, and it is. So let's recap. And I'm going to tack this little video onto the end of the original one so that everybody can see. People who have anxiety about making kraut, this is the easiest way that I know to make kraut. And you can make it in larger batches. You can make 6, 7, 8 of these if you want to. You can make as many as you like. What I do with it, and the reason I make small batches, is that we're going to cover this back up, put the lid back on it, and put it in the refrigerator. We're not going to can it. A lot of folks don't really understand that fermentation is a preservation process. This doesn't have to be canned. This will keep for months in your refrigerator, or if you're lucky enough to have a root cellar, it'll keep a long time in the root cellar. But what we do is, when cabbage is available, we make a couple quarts, we eat it, we make another couple quarts. You can have them processing a week apart and have fresh kraut all the time, or you can go ahead and make several quarts of it and can them according to the directions on the National Center for Home Food Preservation, and I will put that link at the bottom of this video. There's a lot of discussion among people about whether or not you should can it, and you know, it's according to what you're going to use it for. If you plan to cook it, say with sausages or whatever, you might as well can it, because the cooking and the canning is going to kill off the probiotics, those beneficial bacteria that have caused it to become kraut. If you're going to eat it raw, and we eat it raw, we eat it on top of dried beans, or we eat it by itself as a salad. However you want to use your kraut, that determines how you're going to keep it. So this will go in the refrigerator, and oh wait, I have to take a bite. I don't know if you can hear my crunch. It's pretty loud. This is kraut the way we like it. Salty, crisp, no mold, easy to make, and I really hope that you try it, because this will demystify the whole process of making kraut for you. Thank you for joining us for this little project. I will post this as soon as I get it edited so that you can have the whole process beginning to end. Thanks.